Welcome to the Runway, where we cover current events in crypto, Web3, and tech. Let's take off. Uniswap founder Hayden Adams said Wednesday that the SEC has sent a Wells notice to Uniswap Labs, suggesting enforcement will follow. So no big surprise here. The SEC strikes again at the core of American innovation. Another attack on the industry here. Uniswap, for many of you who may or may not know, is a decentralized exchange. It's literally a piece of code that is run by millions of people all over the world and utilized as such. Let's see what Hayden wrote here. He wrote, "Today, Uniswap Labs received a Wells notice from the SEC. I'm not surprised, just annoyed, disappointed, and ready to fight. I am confident that the products we offer are legal and that our work is on the right side of history. But it's been clear for a while that rather than working to create clear, informed rules, the SEC has decided to focus on attacking longtime good actors like Uniswap and Coinbase, all while letting bad actors like FTX slip by. When I first set out to build Uniswap, the goal wasn't to reimagine finance. It was an experiment in radically decentralized, fully automated on-chain markets. I didn't know if it would work or if anyone would use it. Fast forward to today. The Uniswap protocol has processed over 2 trillion in volume. Many thousands of teams and developers have forked our code or built on top of it. We built entirely new financial infrastructure that is transparent, fair, secure, and accessible, powering an entire industry. The team at Uniswap did all of this in the US from our office in New York City. People ask me why we stayed in the US, and my answer is simple. I believe that blockchain is incredibly powerful technology. Like the internet, it's here to stay. So someone needs to figure it out, and it might as well be us. And that's when you build technology that improves people's lives. You don't need to hide. The SEC's mission is protecting investors, maintaining fair, orderly, and efficient markets, and facilitating capital formation. This is a noble mission. I would argue Uniswap does a far better job of this today than the SEC. Yes, I'm frustrated that the SEC seems to be concerned with protecting opaque systems than protecting consumers. And that will have to fight a U.S. government agency to protect our company and our industry. This fight will take years, may go all the way to the Supreme Court, and the future of financial technology and our industry hangs in the balance. If we stand together, we can win. DeFi is worth fighting for. And of course, we won't stop shipping. Stay tuned. What an excellent message there by Hayden. And I think he really lays out the same case that I've been laying out for some time now, that the SEC's mission is protecting investors, maintaining fair, orderly, and efficient markets, and facilitating capital formation. They aren't, doing any of that here. This is just another disgusting abuse of power and attack on the industry. Let's move along. Paraguay seeks to review blanket ban on Bitcoin mining. Paraguay's dilemma comes as Bitcoin miners brace up for an all-important Bitcoin halving event in 2024. Paraguay may be making a U-turn from the Bitcoin mining blanket ban that its lawmakers floated last week. With some progress already made on the controversial proposed ban, officials are now looking to revisit the topic to ascertain that the decision is well thought out. So it looks like here they're actually going to have some conversations and they're going to talk about it in Congress about the impact that Bitcoin mining can have on their country. About 4 days later, however, Senator Salim Buzarquis also submitted a draft declaration of support for local and foreign investment infrastructure to the Senate. In the draft, he highlighted the economic advantages of selling Paraguay's excess energy to licensed Bitcoin miners while encouraging the Ministry of Industry to study the same. Buzarquis also noted how the country's 45 licensed Bitcoin miners have the capacity to generate $48 million for the National Electricity Administration by 2024. The senator did not stop there. He projected that those figures could reach $125 million by 2025, after miners increased their mining capacity by installing more equipment. Of course, the more energy utilized is the more the higher the bills, the energy bills, and the more revenue generated for electricity companies, especially in places like Paraguay. There's a lot of hydroelectric energy available and a lot of green energy. But I'm specifically excited about the hydro energy available in Paraguay. So I think that hopefully they'll figure this out and they'll get this right, and they'll continue to attract miners to their shores. Let's move along here. Chainlink aims to make transfers across blockchains safer with new bridge app, Transporter. Having a secure way to move both value and data across chains is something the blockchain industry has needed for years, Chainlink co-founder Sergey Nazarov said. So this bridge, the bridge that they're looking to build here, this transporter, it uses Chainlink's CCIP tech, which is used by Swift to move a large value of tokens and critical messages safely across blockchains. Bridges serve a key role in connecting individual blockchains, but often are targets of exploits. At the start, Transporter is available for Arbitrum, Avalanche, Base, BNB Chain, Ethereum, Optimism, Polygon, and Wemix. So interesting group of chains to roll this out to. My one reservation with CCIP is the expense, as there is a pretty large cost there. But for larger transactions, I think this is pretty ship ready. So CCIP will definitely work, especially for high value transactions across chains. Circle enables USDC transfers for BlackRock's first tokenized fund. BlackRock USD Institutional Digital Liquidity Fund, the first tokenized fund launched by BlackRock, can now be transferred to Circle using the USD stablecoin. So what are they talking about here? This is this new money market fund that BlackRock has actually launched on chain. Think of investment advisories, company, hedge funds, and banks essentially opening up branches on Ethereum and offering products on the Ethereum blockchain. Ethereum is basically this decentralized application store, this decentralized internet where anybody can transact and smart contracts can occur and many things can happen. BlackRock doing this on chain and enabling people to exit this money market fund position directly into USDC is really, really interesting, right? So you're watching this play out in real time, the liquidity and the ability for people to hold money market fund cash on chain and reap the benefit of that. But if they want to exit that position, they can now simply sell that for USDC. So this is really cool and really interesting. So they're not stuck in that position. All the people that do have those that basically whitelisted wallets that can interact with this can now exit that position easily and turn their tokens into the tokens that represent this money market fund. They can now turn that just into USDC, and then now they can interact with anything in the ecosystem, and likely vice versa, right? It can go back and forth. Let's move on. Raging fire sale. Major Bitcoin miner and legendary crypto trader issues serious halvings price crash warnings. It's a cool little article from Forbes. Had a take some pretty well-respected Bitcoiners from Arthur Hayes to the CEO for Marathon and a couple other individuals. Arthur Hayes raises a really interesting point here. He's a crypto trader and he's a founder of Maelstrom Investment Fund. I believe he was also the founder of BitMEX. He says the narrative of the halving being positive for crypto prices is well entrenched. When most market participants agree on a certain outcome, the opposite usually occurs. So this is an interesting contrarian take here. So maybe in the short run, we will see some volatile price movement around the halving. I guess we'll have to see. US dollar liquidity means Bitcoin and crypto prices in general will slump around the halving, adding propellant to a raging fire sale of crypto assets. However, Hayes also wrote he remains perennially long Bitcoin and crypto, so expect any Bitcoin halving price crash to be short-lived. So here is another take from Marathon and from Fred Thiel. The chief executive of the largest U.S. Bitcoin miner, Marathon Digital, has warned the Bitcoin price rally so far this year means the Bitcoin halving may have already been priced in by markets. The halving event will reduce the supply of Bitcoin by about 450 a day, which would have some small impact on prices probably, Marathon CEO Fred Thiel told Bloomberg. But as miners, we are very excited to go into a halving where prices have not declined prior to the halving, rather prices have gone up, so everybody is obviously maximizing to that. It is a good time to go into a halving if the prices are up, right? Because that means that your revenue and rewards will be higher after the halving. They're obviously going to drop in the short term right after the halving because you're going to be eating less Bitcoin per block. Here's another take from Bakram Sadiluev, product lead at global payments infrastructure platform Mercurio. This is interesting, and this is also a true take. Every Bitcoin halving event may not impact its price similarly, right? Markets will rhyme, they don't always repeat, and just because the fundamentals can say something in the long run doesn't mean that the short-term price movements are going to reflect that, right? There's a famous saying that goes like this: markets can remain irrational much longer than you can remain solvent. So it's always a good idea to be prepared for everything. And that's why I always recommend, if you're going to invest and be involved in the space, dollar cost averaging, set up amounts of funds that will not affect your life. And you can allocate biweekly, weekly, monthly into these assets that you've researched and you believe have long-term fundamental value. Let's move on. A very big deal. Crypto suddenly braced for a huge China ETF earthquake after Bitcoin, Ethereum, and XRP price boom. And I wanted to talk about this article was mainly because there is a lot of talk about a Hong Kong spot Bitcoin ETF approval. This would be hugely bullish for the Asian markets, as now you've got ETF in the Hong Kong Stock Exchange for people to access. Hong Kong is going to allow in-kind creations and redemptions for spot Bitcoin ETFs in the second quarter of 2024. Bloomberg intelligence analyst Eric Balchunas posted to X, adding that unlike the Wall Street spot Bitcoin ETFs that are cash creations only, in-kind could help spark assets under management and volume in the fast-growing region. US CPI comes in faster than hoped, rising 0.4% in March, 3.5% year over year. Stubbornly high inflation has shattered Wall Street expectations for a long series of rate cuts in 2024. And I highlighted this is because it's very important for markets on a macro level, especially when it comes to governments printing money and injecting liquidity into markets. And if this inflation is stickier than expected, not surprising when you print $5 trillion or more out of thin air, expect the market to readjust for quite some time. And that is exactly what we're seeing here. Despite the deflationary effects of technology and innovation, we still, having the cost of goods and services repriced in the market, and that is still underway. And the cost of goods and services is still rising, right? So if you're seeing that inflation rate, that means that prices of goods and services are still climbing month over month and year over year, much more than expected. It's quite possible that until we see the CPI reports come in for a couple months at or below what's expected, the Fed will probably delay the rate cuts. Interesting take, because it's important when it comes to risk on assets, especially as well. Risk on assets usually do better when the money supply is increasing and governments are stimulating and printing money. France is teaching the crypto world that responsible regulation and innovation can coexist peacefully. The MiCA regulation itself is arguably the biggest ever attempt to regulate crypto assets at scale without stifling progress and development on chain. 2024 is a landmark year for crypto regulation. While US-approved Bitcoin ETFs have spurred the market to new highs, an arguably more seismic transition is taking place across the pond as the EU's new markets and crypto MiCA Act law comes into effect this year. The French government and Emmanuel Macron have been committed to support the country's digital developments, which has encompassed the Web3 industry and led established firms and startups to set up hubs in Paris. One example of a company that's there is Ledger. A lot of people use a Ledger hardware wallet, and they are a French incubated company. Last year, Circle, Coinbase, and Gemini all announced licensing-based developments with the French authorities in a bid to boost their European presence. Coinbase went as far as citing its own woes with the SEC as a reason for the strategic move to Europe. Other countries are scooping up talent and Web3 innovators, and the US is largely losing out because of the way that our government here has been behaving. The government, France already has the sixth in the world when it comes to blockchain developer talent. Earlier this year, the government announced a 150 million euro fund for Web3 projects that support French cultural sovereignty in immersive environments and metaverse, with Paris Blockchain Week and a lot of stuff happening in the tech sphere in Paris and in France. The government itself has created a fund to attract talent there. This was kind of awesome. I found this quote to be really interesting, is that they're really going after this idea of the metaverse when it comes to NFTs and culture and fashion. Paris has always been a global hub for culture, particularly in fashion, design, and the arts. Thanks to the city's strong academic institutions, peerless cultural history and heritage, and international makeup, we have always thought of the open metaverse powered by blockchain as a set of new economies centered around a new form of culture. Paris has emerged as a powerhouse for blockchain culture. Events such as Paris Blockchain Week have impressed and nudged the French government to be more involved and step up in supporting innovation. PBW has been a significant contributor to the innovation by positioning France as a global leader in digital assets and making sure that they involve corporates, entrepreneurs, innovators, technologists, developers, and creatives all in one place to go deep and wide on all relevant topics. They do call this responsible regulation and innovation. These things can coexist peacefully. I do have serious reservations about MiCA and when it comes to privacy and the freedom aspect of allowing people to be free with their assets. Layer 1 Near will hire artificial intelligence engineers. According to a deck reviewed by CoinDesk, the company is planning to hire AI engineers soon, and its product team is working to plan AI work streams over a 3 to 6 month transitioning phase. The deck was presented earlier today via a virtual town hall meeting by Near co-founder Ilya Polosukin with Near core employees. There's some potential here beyond what so many different tokens are launching and throwing AI in the name. This co-founder from Near, Polo Sushukin, he was actually on a panel at NVIDIA's conference titled Transforming AI last month at the GTC conference, and he also is largely responsible and a part of the, here's the exact quote. It says, "The company is well seasoned in terms of AI expertise. Polo Sukin is an artificial intelligence researcher and software engineer that co-built the Transformer architecture. The architecture powers generative AI systems like ChatGPT, generative pre-trained transformer. He was actually a part of developing that technology to begin with, which I think is kind of interesting. As far as how they plan to go about this, they didn't really go too much into the weeds here, but it says Layer 1 says it believes it is uniquely positioned to make AI open source given its not-for-profit and decentralized nature. The company also said the growth of revenue incentives will always take over at for-profit companies, whereas at Near, its token economy will create value in an open, permissionless ecosystem." I love the sound of that. That sounds fantastic, and I will be following this closely. So let's move over to the X factor. The reason I love X so much is because, unlike mainstream media, where you have people writing articles about things they have no idea about. It doesn't even make sense half the time. If you go read it and you're an expert in the field, when you read an article written by some of these clowns and some of these propagandists, you'll say, what the hell are these guys talking about? The reason I love X so much is because you can go directly to the sources. You can meet and read the thoughts of the people that are in the industries that they are practicing in, and you can go right to the horse's mouth. And a lot of times you get cutting edge takes and you get great content that you can't really find anywhere else in the world. X has truly become the de facto town square, the place where people go to post their ideas and their thoughts. And you might not always agree with those thoughts, but that being said, it's a place of open debate, and you can read, respond, comment, talk, and discuss these things. So with that being said, let's move here to our X Factor, and let's go into our first take of the day. Zach Vowell. The SEC is supposed to protect investors, whatever that means anymore. So who exactly, literally, what type of investor is being protected by suing Uniswap Labs? Great take by Zach here. I mean, this whole thing is absolutely asinine and ridiculous. Anybody who knows how to use Uniswap and who is actively engaging with Web3 and dApps obviously knows what they're doing and is a skilled investor or skilled operator of the Web3 ecosystem. And all Uniswap is basically code that allows people to transact. They are not holding anybody's funds. They are not, there's no company that is doing any of that. And they are just facilitating the transactions peer-to-peer between people. Here is Stuart Alderati. The SEC continues to lose. The Second Circuit Court of Appeals refused to reconsider their decision in Govel, which held that if a buyer suffers no financial loss, the SEC is not entitled to disgorgement from the seller. No surprise here. Another fat L for the SEC. And we talked about this earlier. Breaking news, Hong Kong is set to approve spot Bitcoin ETFs next week, reports indicate. Are you prepared? The Hong Kong SFC has expedited the approval process, positioning Hong Kong as a pioneer in Asia's Bitcoin ETF space. The move comes ahead of industry expectations for launches later this year. Next up by Dan Held, U.S. government steals part of your paycheck, prints unlimited money, has 35 trillion of debt. Bitcoin. Fixed monetary policy, no counterparty risk, completely in your control. The choice is easy. I love a lot of these premier thinkers in the space. And you can see their thoughts directly here on X. Robert Breedlove, another great Bitcoin thinker and philosopher. Here he posts, it's all relative except Bitcoin. It might not be 100% perfect, but it's really cool. So you can see the total number of halving epochs, which is 32. You can see the symbol for a summation equation. Here you can see the initial epoch, which is 0. The number of blocks in each halving epoch. So you can see there's 210,000 blocks, which is roughly every 4 years. And you times that by the maximum initial block reward, which is divided by the current halving epoch, which is the I, and 2, which is the halving, right? So every 4 years, roughly, after every 210,000 blocks, the inflation gets cut in half. So initially it was 50 Bitcoin per block, and now we are down to 3. But we're going to be down in the next couple of weeks, down to about 3.25 Bitcoin, or 3.125, right around there. Next up, Mike Lee. We can put anyone in jail if you know what to do. This isn't national security. This isn't law enforcement. This is fascism. Yet another reason why we'd be crazy to reauthorize FISA 702 without a warrant requirement. The fact that our government and public servants can spy on us without any warrant in direct violation of the Fourth Amendment is literally absurd, and it's a massive disrespect to the Constitution, and it's honestly anti-American. And even though many of these individuals, might be doing this for the right reason, they might be thinking that they're keeping you safe. The ends do not justify the means, and we need to respect the Constitution and our Fourth Amendment rights. That being said, this interesting character here, this Gavin O'Blenis, I mean, this is just disgusting behavior. This CIA officer, former FBI, boasts they can put anyone in jail, set them up. We call it a nudge. This is essentially entrapment is what this is. The FBI did what we wanted with Alex Jones, took his money away, chopped his legs off. I mean, this is just kind of wild some wild stuff to say, and it's just a total abuse of power. This power needs to be curtailed. This whole violation of our rights here, it needs to go into effect, and there's no reason that this FISA 702 should be reauthorized. So glad to see people standing up to that. Alex, hey Safedine, I just completed the Fiat Standard, a read I'll recommend to all who have read the Bitcoin Standard. If you're up for writing a trilogy, I suggest the next one be titled The War Standard. To manifest its existence, I proactively created the cover. Thoughts? This is very interesting here. The violent alternative to world peace. I love this take here by Alex. But I will let you know, Alex, that Saifuddin, I believe, did already complete the trilogy. This would be the 4th book. Let's see here. Kyle Becker. Thomas Massey grills Mike Turner over Congress's carve-out for warrantless surveillance of Americans. Instead of giving a carve-out to Congress from unconstitutional spying, just require a warrant for all Americans, Representative Thomas Massey declared. This is unbelievable that some of these Congress people think that because they saw what happened with the political spying that was occurring against the Trump campaign and some other people on certain sides of the aisle, that this process was being abused. They now want to be carved out, exempt from this. They want to have warrants if they're going to get spied upon, but they don't want that for the rest of the American people. I mean, this is peak fiat, peak bullshit type of. I mean, this is what makes people just want to kill these motherfuckers. To say it politely, they want to be exempt. This is rules for thee, but not rules for me, right? It's just basically a giant fuck you to all Americans that basically says, let them eat cake, right? It's like that moment where screw off peasants. Let us, we're going to carve out this exception for us, but not for all of Americans that we're supposed to represent. This just makes my blood boil. And, you guys don't hear me curse too often on this pod, but this is just absolutely absurd. How has the U.S. made it legal to gamble in shopping malls in suburbia, comprised mostly of people losing their Social Security money and life savings at the craps table? Go to 1 and see. But they want to control with complete precision what you are allowed to invest into. Great point here, and the hypocrisy is kind of unfathomable here, right? At the end of the day, people are either free to do what they want with their own money and free to make their own decisions, and again, free to suffer the consequences of those decisions, or they're not, right? So, we might as well be living, in communism where Big Brother tells us everything that we can do. Adam S. Cochran, unbelievable. Uniswap is 6 years old. For 6 years, the SEC has failed to provide any guidance on the space and now sends them a Wells notice. Let's be really fucking clear on something here. And I'm going to go down and read each one of the posts by Adam Cochran. This is a great thread. Uniswap Labs is a software publisher. They publish open source code and an open source front end. Unless this Wells notice specifically relates to Uniswap X routing, which even then is questionable, this is absolutely beyond the scope of the SEC. The SEC has had years to provide guidance on these behaviors and chose not to. In fact, some of the Uniswap's products are so old now, they are actually outside the statute of limitations for certain violations of the Act. This SEC has continued to embarrass itself in courts with political cases that it cannot win time and time again and create a chilling effect on the U.S. market. And now they choose to go against another legitimate operator rather than countless scams. Hell, they lost the Ripple case on the grounds of programmatic transactions not counting as securities transactions. The wallet as a broker argument was thrown out in the Coinbase case, and now they want to try front end as a broker? More importantly, if they take fault with the code itself, they'll open themselves up to an entirely new landscape because your right to publish code is protected free speech. You can publish code. You as an individual can trade spot commodities with anyone you want. There is nothing illegal about providing an informational interface about spot commodity prices or formatting numbers for a transaction. Uniswap is not responsible for listing or promoting the tokens because it's a permissionless market. And above all else, the SEC has failed in court to prove that these assets are not spot commodities with any clear application of the law. This is nothing more than another flagrant personal attack on the space by someone who doesn't understand the technology and is more worried about making a name for himself than actually doing his job, and the SEC will lose yet again. This is rambling and disjointed because I'm pissed. Normally, the SEC's actions are weak arguments and oversteps, but this BS literally starts to creep into trying to fight against rights we established in the 90s on software equals speech. Whole new line in the sand. So I agree with mostly everything Adam said here, and I think he does a great job laying it all out. And I think articulates how ridiculous and absurd the behavior of this rogue government agency is. And the only thing that I will disagree with is number 9 here, where he says, this is nothing more than another flagrant personal attack on the space by someone who doesn't understand the technology and is more worried about making a name for himself than actually doing his job. I think he's wrong here. I think he does know absolutely what he's doing here, and I think he's being completely disingenuous, and he's being the ultimate sellout, hypocritical essentially soulless person who's essentially sold his soul. Because if you look at his MIT course and you look at exactly things that he said when he was teaching his course at MIT only a few years ago, this is direct. A lot of this stuff is direct contradictions to what he was saying then, and nothing has really changed since then. All that's changed is he's come into a position of power, and his boss, his lackey, Elizabeth Warren, is telling him what to do. And since he got the power, he got promoted to his position because of her. He is literally her. Basically, he's her bitch, and he's doing exactly what she tells him to do. And in order to do that, he's literally sold his soul to the devil, essentially. So shame on you, Gary Gensler. Shame, shame, shame. You're a disgrace. Absolute disgrace. Let's move along. Well, looks like this post was limited, which kind of sucks because it was a good post. Let's see here. Oh, it looks like maybe they changed the setting here and we can't see this post that we previously could see. That kind of sucks. Jason Yanowitz. The SEC is pushing the best founders offshore. Hayden built Uniswap from Brooklyn. The U.S. government is now telling future Haydens to go build in Dubai or Singapore. This has to change soon or will crush innovation for years. So great point here, and I agree completely. And Martin Shkreli says, who'd you vote for? And goes, point taken. Though I don't think Republicans are clamoring to keep crypto in the U.S. either. I kind of disagree with him here. I think that the Republican side of the aisle has shown to be a much stronger ally to the Web3 and cryptocurrency space. That being said, there are some great Democratic candidates who have allied themselves with the space, but that is the exception, not the rule. This is an interesting little take here by Martin Shkreli. He says, when was the last time you talked to a Republican presidential candidate? And Yano said, other than Vivek, I don't think they're fans of crypto. Trump, Ted Pence, Nikki, Ron, etc., but would love to be told otherwise. Ted, dude's a huge fan of Bitcoin. Way off base here. Hasn't done his research. Trump is literally launching NFT collections on Ethereum, but also on Bitcoin now. Ron DeSantis has also done a lot of stuff here in Florida, where we're at. We've pushed some great bills protecting the industry here and banning CBDCs and being pro-Bitcoin. So some interesting little threads here. People starting to wake up, starting to learn. Let's move on. Jake Chervinsky. The SEC is a financial markets regulator, not the open source software police. Great take, and I agree. Eric Voorhees. Honestly, I'm not even sure there is a chilling effect anymore. More tokens exist today at higher market caps than during ICO boom. Crypto at all-time highs, DeFi flourishing. We're building orbital space stations while SEC sends mean letters through the post. At Hayden Z Adams and at Uniswap. So I do agree here, right? I think people are just, fed up with this shit, and they're just kind of starting to ignore it. And again, the SEC keeps losing in court, and they're basically destroying the credibility of an agency that had a lot of respect for a long time. Cedar Innovation Foundation. The SEC has had years to provide guidance to DeFi developers and users. Instead, it sues U.S.-based good actors who have followed all existing law. The SEC's regulation by enforcement approach to crypto is hurting consumers, developers, and American innovation. It's time for Congress to act and put an end to Gensler's reign of chaos. Good point. Ryan Selkis. Senator Warren assassinated 3 crypto-friendly banks extrajudicially last year, helping spark the worst bank crisis since 2008. The most stable depositors of those banks were stablecoin issuers. She's one of the most egregious liars and Machiavellian Marxists in the U.S. Wow, could not agree more here with Ryan's take. Paul Grewal.eth. Sometimes you have to laugh or else you'll cry. Question. How can you square the SEC Gov's claim that at Uniswap acts as a broker with the court's ruling against the SEC Gov just a handful of days ago? Answer. You can't. As an initial matter, the SEC's allegations do not implicate many of the factors courts use in identifying a broker. Notably, the SEC does not allege that the wallet application negotiates terms for the transaction, makes investment recommendations, arranges financing, holds customer funds, processes trade documentation, or conducts independent asset evaluations. Rather, the complaint alleges that Coinbase charged a 1% commission for wallet brokerages services, actively solicits investors to use wallet, compares price across different third-party trading platforms, and routes custom orders and crypto asset securities to those platforms. Upon closer examination, these allegations, alone or in combination, are insufficient to establish brokerage activities. So I think he's just raising the point here that the SEC tried to go after this self-custodial wallet platform that Coinbase was promoting or recommending, and basically says that no, a self-custodial wallet is not a broker, in the same way that a decentralized DEX like Uniswap is not a broker either, right? So he's basically applying the same logic to both, and it looks like the SEC will just continue to take L's. Ryan Selkis, another take about Warren, the Pocahontas as they call her. President Warren will run U.S. financial services again, her second shadow term, if cadaver-in-chief Bowden is reelected. She will work to 100% destroy crypto. Unapologetically, Trump is the one we need if you want crypto to not be fully strangled in the West. Yes, he is absolutely the lesser of two evils. And, honestly has come around a lot, as we've spoken about many times in this industry. When you're launching NFT collections and your wife's launching NFT collections and you're seeing the potential of this technology, and you've got people in your ear like Vivek, and he's orange pilling you and explaining things to you. I think that he will run with that as an advisor. And Trump is no stranger to taking popular positions to bring on new voters. And I think that's what he's doing here with what we've seen from this current administration. He's absolutely a better option for our industry, no doubt. Eric Balchunas, more wild stuff in China as local investors pile into a gold stock ETF, pushing its premium to 30% and forcing it to halt trading. Investors there are so desperate to buy things that are not linked to their own economy stock market, which has been in the gutter. For those wondering, buying Bitcoin ETFs is not allowed there. If it were, my guess is they'd be going gaga for them, given how much FOMO they have been showing for gold and US stocks, BTC easily outperforming both. Interesting. And what he's kind of highlighting here is that the Chinese investors they're trying to hedge themselves against the massive money printing and the terrible economic conditions that are somewhat communistically controlled there, where they can't really, they're not allowed to short things, and they are not allowed to, there's really tight capital controls. They're not allowed to get money out. It's very difficult to get money out of China into the global economy. So this is just what he's kind of highlighting here. Here is a interesting post here by River. It's just kind of a little thread here about who owns Bitcoin and some interesting tech CEOs and how much Bitcoin they have, talking about Jack Dorsey, Elon Musk, Tim Cook, Mark Zuckerberg. And the thread goes on. Check out our recent video. Otherwise, let's get into how much Bitcoin Satoshi has, other individuals, companies, funds, and governments. This is a great infographic. They've got a lot of information on each one of these slides. It goes into Bitcoin ownership distribution. It's just some great visuals here, right? They've done a great job. And they highlight some key points. There will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin. This is what the distribution looks like across the major categories. Funds have been rapidly buying up Bitcoin, so we expect some major changes in the coming years. So here you can see the distribution of Bitcoin and who owns what, and the miners, and how much individuals own, and businesses, and funds, and governments. And what I love to see about this whole thing is that we've got the biggest chunk of Bitcoin owned by individuals, which is just fantastic. I mean, you just don't see something like this with any asset really in human history even, right? If you look at stock shares and you look at all sorts of things, I mean, most of those things are owned by the founders or a couple of individuals or governments or the Fed through their little stimulus plans or whatever they do, funds and ETFs, businesses. And here with Bitcoin, with the ownership distribution, you've got literally maybe 60 to 70% of the supply is owned by individuals. How fantastic is that? 12 million Bitcoin is owned by individuals, and the rest, between miners, individuals, and Bitcoin that's been lost, that's like 60 to 70% of the supply, which is just incredible. If you're wondering what Potoshi is, this is the name given to a very early mining pattern that was discovered in 2019 and suspected to be Satoshi Nakamoto keeping the network running. Almost none of this Bitcoin ever moved in 15 years. My personal opinion is that it most likely will never move. The biggest known individual Bitcoin holders are the Winklevoss twins, Tyler and Cameron, Tim Draper, and Michael Saylor. If we missed you from the list, our DMs are open. Some of the wealthiest Bitcoin holders in the world, 70,000 Bitcoin between the Winklevoss twins, right? Tim Draper, 30,000. And Michael Saylor, personally, 17,732. Now, if we look at businesses, you can see for businesses, most Bitcoin is held by MicroStrategy, which is an extension of Michael Saylor. But you can see that, MicroStrategy, Block1, and Tether are the three biggest companies that hold Bitcoin, and you can visualize that metric here. Thousands of other companies also hold Bitcoin on their balance sheet. Of course, a lot of Bitcoin is also held on major exchanges on behalf of millions of clients. Here we've got the funds and ETFs. They've been covered at length on Twitter. They have been rapidly accumulating hundreds of thousands of Bitcoin over the past months. Grayscale, BlackRock's iShares, and Fidelity have the biggest holdings, but again, on behalf of clients. So this is somewhat of an extension of individuals that are now, although they might not be educated enough to do self-custody, they are gaining price exposure and direct exposure through these ETFs. And that's, if you look at this chart since the beginning of the year, just over the past couple months, what's expected and what's happening. What I like about this visual is you can actually visually see the daily new Bitcoin supply mined. So you can actually see how much Bitcoin is being mined and how much is projected to be mined over the next year. And you can also see the ETF flows, the prediction of just how much is going to be accumulated. And you can see this growing gap between the daily supply and the demand that's just ever growing for this asset. If we missed any confirmed major holders in this thread, let us know in the comments. So hopefully the US government doesn't sell off this reserve and we remain the number one holder of Bitcoin in the world. China has 190,000. They're closely on our heels. And there's really no reason, as I mentioned before, for the US to sell any of its Bitcoin. They should instead follow in El Salvador's footsteps and Bhutan's footsteps and continue to accumulate Bitcoin and add it as a treasury reserve asset. Great little walkthrough and infographic explainer. This is why I love X so much. There's just so much great content here in real time being posted daily. I mean, it's hard to even keep up with it all. Let's look at this from Jameson Lopp. One Bitcoin is subdivisible into 100 million units called Satoshis. So for a lot of people ask me, I can never afford a Bitcoin. I can never afford any Bitcoin. What I tell them is that, each Bitcoin is subdivisible in the same way a dollar is divisible into 100 pennies. You can divide a Bitcoin into 100 million of subunits called Satoshis. So we call them sats. Since fees can range from 100 to 100,000 Satoshis, it's best to stick to transact in million plus Satoshi amounts on chain. On second layer protocols, you can send amounts as low as 1 Satoshi for practically free. So this is, while we just touched on the divisibility of Bitcoin, what he's saying here is that using that base layer of Bitcoin, the layer 1, it's more expensive, right? You're going to pay a higher fee. So he mentions that, that's really meant more for high value transactions. And in the future, what I see is that base layer being a settlement layer for governments and for big businesses, while individuals will transact on a second layer protocol like the Lightning Network, right? Think of it as essentially the Venmo or the Cash App that sits on top of your bank account. That's an easy explainer for people to sort of understand what a layer 2 or a layer 3 might look like, right? Really, when you're using Venmo, when you're using PayPal, and you're using Cash App, you're actually interacting on a much higher layer than the base layer of the US dollar fiat system, right? You're not directly interacting with the treasury. You're not directly interacting with, some of the largest banks in the world. You are interacting with an obfuscated layer, right? And Nick Bhatia has a book called Layered Money, where he goes in and discusses this, right? If you're using cash or using all these other things, you are, using a debit card, you're using a Venmo or PayPal, you're way, up the food chain of, layers of money. You're on the fourth or fifth layer of money. Let's move along here. Glenn Greenwald. And there's lots of crazy stuff happening right now with X in Brazil and, a lot of authoritarian censorship behavior occurring all over the world. But here we have Glenn Greenwald saying, the Brazilian left and increasingly US liberals believe and often state that free speech is a fascist value. They say this even though not a single fascist regime has ever defended or offered free speech. And every fascist regime in history has used censorship. I can agree there more with Glenn Greenwald. I think he just lays it out. Here's a project that I'm a huge fan of and that I've been involved with since the inception, and it's called Dynex. Full disclosure, I'm a holder of Dynex. I am very interested in the project. They post disruptive. Was the idea of bringing electricity into every household? Was the idea of bringing personal computers to the mainstream? Was the idea of electronic cash, Bitcoin? Was the idea of creating electric cars, Tesla? Was the idea of creating a smart contract blockchain, ETH? Was the idea of creating a multi-use rocket, SpaceX? Large-scale quantum computing, Dynex, right? So This project is a what I'd call a decentralized physical infrastructure network, or a DPIN, and it also uses the term of proof of useful work, right? So the miners and people who are running these GPUs, they are not only contributing to the blockchain, but that computation and that what we call useful work can actually be directed at solving real world problems and computing. And the way Dynex operates, this abstracted neuromorphic computing, right? So traditional computing operates a certain way, but they are using software to mimic this idea of a neuromorphic network. And it's the technology behind it is very fascinating. You never know with these things, but I have been very surprised and very excited about what I'm seeing out of Dynex. Here's a take from Cynthia Lummis. The central planners are shaking in their boots. Decentralization is a goal written explicitly and implicitly engineered into the United States founding documents. Keep going. Cynthia Lummis talking about how high-ranking government officials feel threatened by Bitcoin because they can't control it. Again, that is a common theme here. The government and this bloated central government that we've created that was not the vision of America and the vision of the founding fathers has, they like to be in control of everything, right? This idea of they want to be in control. They want to, micromanage and be able to manage every little thing that happens. And it's really not, it's completely antithetical to what America was, founded upon, the principles of American founding. Caitlin Long, great work by Conrad Alt shedding light on the debanking of fintech. Only 3% of U.S. banks are partner banks to fintechs, but 35% of bank regulators' enforcement actions were aimed at these 3% of banks. It's not just crypto caught in Operation Choke Point 2.0. So very interesting take here. Caitlin Long has been shining light on this, and many of us in the industry have felt this from our, any banking institution that we've interacted with. And a lot of this pressure is coming unconstitutionally from the government and from the same cabinet that did the same unconstitutional actions in the Obama administration. And Choke Point 1.0, they are now back in power doing the same thing, abusing their power, even after losing in court and being sued. So, again, sadly, there's probably not going to be any consequences for this, and that's a travesty of justice. Colin Rugg. Breaking, Elon Musk says that ex-employees in Brazil have been told they will be arrested as Brazilian leadership continues to attack free speech. The comment from Musk came in response to Brazilian politician Nicolas Ferreira. We need to get our employees in Brazil to a safe place or otherwise not in a position of responsibility. Then we will do a full data dump. They have been told they will be arrested. Insane. And I do agree. That is absolutely absurd. Jameson Lopp. KYC of financial accounts was just a testing ground. Tyrants wish to KYC every aspect of your life. You need not look any further than China to foresee the endgame. They will surveil every message you send, every transaction you make, even your very connection to the internet. And this is exactly why we need to double down and protect our Fourth Amendment rights and our First Amendment rights and all of our constitutional rights. But this is why FISA cannot be renewed, and we need to, repeal things that are unconstitutional, like the Patriot Act. Alex Gladstein. This is a great little clip here. I'm going to play this for you guys because I thought it was great little take from, I think it was on Peter McCormick's podcast, and they were just having this interview and this conversation. But I'm going to skip ahead to the last, I would say, 30 seconds of it.
What do you need to survive? You need censorship, confiscation, and closed capital markets. You cannot survive without these three things. Now, what is Bitcoin? Bitcoin is free speech, property rights, and open capital markets. It's fundamentally opposed to the DNA of dictatorship. Now, it doesn't mean that there won't be autocrats in a Bitcoin standard, but it'll be a lot harder to do so because people will have the power to push back and to be financially free. And that's going to be very devastating for them.
Alex Gladstein is one of the, greatest Bitcoin thinkers, I think, right up there with Breedlove and some of these other guys, where he is able to take these complex ideas and these philosophical ideas and really lay them out in a very easy to understand way, right? So what he's essentially saying here is that Bitcoin is basically antithetical to everything that has to do with tyranny and authoritarianism. It is the complete opposite of those things, right? It is this peaceful opt-out system that anybody can choose to participate in or not participate in. It doesn't force you to do anything, and it just continues to chug along and play by the rules that's mathematically set in code, right? So Bitcoin is free speech, property rights, and open capital markets. You do the math. Next take by Noah Chauvin. Happening now, the House Rules Committee considers the Reforming Intelligence and Securing American Act, a bill to reauthorize FISA Section 702. I think since this post was taken that they did not reauthorize this. I think it was a good 19 to 20 senators stood up and went against this, which was good to stop this. So here is Tim Scott. I'm going to play this clip too because it's only 40 seconds. And you can see here, Paul Grewal posts this about Tim Scott. And it's about this whole conversation about illicit financing and all the FUD and lies about digital assets. And he just kind of lays out the facts here.
The bottom line is this, that if $35 billion represents the export of oil from Iran, none of which is purchased using digital assets, having a conversation simply and exclusively about digital assets misses the elephant in the room, that every single time we make it easier for the Iranian regime to receive resources from the United States in cash, pallets of cash, or through electricity waivers, use euros or license, we put more and more Americans and our allies in harm's way, and that includes Israel. And so for us to have a conversation that sounds like a digital asset conversation, the bottom line is,
yeah, I mean, he's just calling out the fact here that, some of these clowns and some of these authoritarians, they want to pin all this stuff on digital assets when most of all this trade is all happening in fiat dollars. And like digital assets are such a small 1% or less portion of any of this. It's just asinine and ridiculous, right? It's a deflection, it's scapegoating, it's propaganda is all it is. And thank you, Tim, for calling that out. Here is a post from Balaji. Within 1 month, they posted a 47% overshoot on the largest budget in world history. This means the US government itself has no financial controls. They have no idea what they're spending or earning. So when they hit the wall, it will come suddenly. Act accordingly. That the US government military cannot pass an audit. It's lost track of trillions in assets. It doesn't know what it's spending or what it's doing, partly because no one can hold it accountable. Now extend that to the US government as a whole. I can't remember if it was Eisenhower who warned of the military industrial complex. Most of the money is going towards the war machine, essentially. And, even the extension of the rest of the government now is there's such a disconnect and such a waste of funds and money and expense that it's honestly just disgusting. And it's unsustainable from just looking at history. This is an unsustainable path. And Balaji is really a very interesting thinker and a contrarian thinker and has been posting a lot of great content on X. So if you haven't followed him, give him a follow. So we'll skip that and go here to Caitlin Long, which is another post by her. Wow, what a brazen power grab by Warren, a U.S. senator trying to control legislation in the House, just as she controls Biden's financial policy. Her ends justify the means overreach so she can enact a CBDC is not even a secret anymore. Separation of powers has no meaning to her. And I think Caitlin Long hits the point on the head. Many of these people, they do not abide by the U.S. Constitution. They don't believe that, that document is even relevant anymore. And they just, are very hungry, and all they do is seek power, and they want more power, more control, more power, because they know what's best for you. Michelle Weekly. Can someone give me a TLDR on the current Sailor drama like I'm an autistic 5-year-old with no attention span who really doesn't actually care? So recently there's been some drama between Michael Saylor and some other Bitcoiners. And here is Michael Saylor's take, which is the Search for Truth here writes, the bottom line is donations should be decentralized so devs can't be bought. That is Saylor's point. It would create a backdoor lobbying for future development in favor of Wall Street. We all need to donate to support devs so they know who really supports them, the network. There's some interesting takes here, right? There's two sides to every story here, right? So a lot of, I think it's Bitwise and some of maybe these other funds that are donating through the ETF, like percentage of the ETF profits or whatever, they're donating to the Bitcoin Core Dev Fund. I think beggars can't really be choosers, right? So any of these donations, should be transparent and open so everybody can see who's donating, and there's really no conflict of interest there, so that everything is very public. But, I do see Saylor's point as well that individuals should be donating more so that nobody could be bought and no devs would, point favoritism or do anything towards any of the entities that are donating to them. Decentralization is absolutely very important. So I do see both sides of the story. Perrianne, Senator Warren is pushing for what could effectively be a backdoor ban on digital assets, Bitcoin mining, and unhosted wallets. All Americans need to pay attention to this legislation that could limit access to open source technologies. So she's the founder and CEO of the Digital Chamber and Digital Power US, an advocate for Bitcoin, crypto, and blockchain tech. So give her a follow. I can't bring myself to follow Elizabeth Warren. She's unbelievably hypocritical and terrible legislator. Elizabeth Warren is pushing for all this stuff. And again, as we've noted before, I don't think she's ever had a successful bill. She's 0-300 or something ridiculous. So she's literally lost every single time she's ever proposed anything, which just shows you how radical she is and how out there. She can't get any buy-in from across the aisle. She can't get anybody to really sponsor and push through her bills. She can't build any kind of quorum or consensus. Just a loudmouth, essentially, a loudmouth, a radical individual. Wall Street apes. The central banking cartel and Federal Reserve are destroying the livelihoods of every American. We must end the Federal Reserve and kick central banks out of America. People like James O'Keefe and Godfrey Bloom are rare breeds to be brave enough to raise awareness. Sadly, I don't think this is going to happen anytime soon. Give this guy, James O'Keefe, a follow. He keeps getting these clowns to just spill the beans on everything to him. I don't know how he does it. It's just like real journalism. And he goes on, he pretends to be gay or trans or all sorts of different things. He ends up going on dates with these guys and these characters, and they just like essentially spill the beans on all sorts of unethical or illegal behavior that is occurring behind the scenes. So well worth a watch. He really is all in to his method and his research. Here is Elon. What are the odds? Every single person who confuses correlation and causation ends up dying. Funny little meme there. For immediate release, Bitcoin CEO is pleased to report that the inflation reduction algorithm, presciently codified in 2009, is on track to execute as intended at block height 840,000 next week. What does he mean there? He's talking about the halving. All right, guys, that is all I have for you today. Stay safe, stay blessed, never stop learning, and keep an open mind. Thanks for listening.